but I'll give it over to Jeff at the Center for Neutron Research. As we talked, they have their own version that they call Bruce.
Thanks,
yeah, Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Start my presentation. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Krzywon. I am a staff scientist at the NCNR, and I'm going to talk about our implementation of NEMO that we call Bruce. So a little bit about who we are. We're one of the 2 user facilities at NIST. We're the Center for Neutron Research, and we're one of the few remaining Neutron user facilities in all of North America. There's a little aerial view of our little facility there. And we're in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So a little bit about what we do. We use neutrons for science. We have a little research reactor. What is different from our reactor from a power reactor is instead of funneling our neutrons through the core, we actually funnel them away from our reactor core, which is this Millennium Falcon looking thing right here. We funnel them down tubes that we call neutron guides toward various experimental stations. We can put different types of samples in the neutron pathways, and those neutrons will scatter off the nuclei of those samples. And based on how those neutrons scatter, we can determine things like size down to the nanometer scale up to the micrometer scale. We can study energy changes in the neutrons that are on the order of atomic vibrations up to molecular vibrations. We can also study diffusion on the time scale down to a picosecond. So you can study molecular diffusion there as well. So during a normal reactor cycle for our reactor, we're operating 38 days continuously. During those 38 days, we're on 24/7, no stopping. And then we typically stop for about 10 days to refuel. We have 26 neutron experimental stations in our facility. During a typical year, we have about 2,500 participants come from all over the world to use these different experimental stations. They perform roughly 750 experiments during the course of a typical year, and all of those result in about 350 peer-reviewed publications. Roughly half of those experiments are through our proposal system. Oops, sorry, I scrolled on the wrong thing. So why are we using NEMO? Well, as we were discussing earlier, back in March of 2020, NIST shut its doors and sent everyone home to be completely 100% telework at the time. June of 2020 rolled around, and NIST decided to reopen on a limited basis. One of the facilities that was able to reopen its doors and restart was the NCNR. But this came with some serious restrictions. First and foremost, no users were allowed in the building or on campus, so we had to go to a completely mail-in program. We had to maximize social distancing while we were in the building, so we had to worry about how many people were in different areas at different times. We had to minimize the amount of time we were total in the building to maximize telework. We had a total number, a cap on the number of people in the building, and each of the teams that are within the NCNR were given an allotted number of people allowed out of that maximum. Also, each of our roughly 20 some odd user laboratories that people use for sample preparation during their experiment, we were only allowing 1 or 2 people down from a normal like 6 to 8 at any given time. So, we needed a few things to be able to do this. So over the course of the month of June, management evaluated quite a few commercial and open source laboratory management systems. And in the end, NEMO met almost all of our needs. It allows area, group, and also tool limits for number of people at place. It allows scheduling for going in and out. It's user driven, so our staff could go in and say, I need to go in at this time for these different purposes. But we started to run into some issues early on regarding when schedules would change. So this is October of last year for one of our groups. This is the entire month of October. So you can see there's, on a typical day, there's about, 5 to 10 people going in and out. The problem is management dictated on the NCNR level that any person or any reservation that they would use to go into the building, into a laboratory, to use a tool, use an instrument, that required explicit permission from the person who was responsible for that particular instrument or lab. Well, a person, a laboratory responsible who would go in and see this going in the next day to try and find any differences was causing some serious issues because, if one of these changes, one of them cancels, I know there's the emails, but they were getting dozens, if not hundreds of emails a day from all the people asking for lab space. So this was causing some confusion and some issues with those people. So they were actually using a secondary spreadsheet to track all the experiments and all of the reservations and whether or not they had been explicitly given permission to go in. So what we needed to do is we needed to start making some changes to the base NEMO, unfortunately. So this is where we started to diverge. Like I said, we are calling ours Bruce. It's currently built off of NEMO version 3.5. So anything that's been between 3.5 and 3.10, 3.6 and 3.10, excuse me, is not in there. The first thing we changed was the reservation model. We added a top-down confirmation system to each reservation. So we added a flag to say whether or not a reservation was confirmed by somebody, a time stamp for when that reservation was confirmed, and a user who confirmed that. So this allowed staff and potentially in the future users to go in, request an appointment to go into the building, and then management can then go in and confirm that appointment. We also changed the user preferences model. A lot of our staff were wanting the emails for all of the invites to go to their personal email addresses. We on the back, our administrators were having trouble with the 100 some odd staff members, constantly changing their emails. So we actually added an option to the user's preferences to add an alternate email. Eventually we also made a change to the user model. When we first started using NEMO, it was mostly to use lab space and schedule lab space. Not all of the teams were using NEMO at this time, or Bruce, excuse me, for us at the time. So we needed the supervisors who were allocating slots in the building to know that their staff was going in for this particular purpose. They also needed a slot in the building to be sure that they were allowed in. I'll go over this more. We've actually found different use cases for this particular thing. We also added some changes to the calendar view. At this point in NEMO, the title of the experiments aren't modifiable by user level. We changed that just for our communication purposes. There used to be, before we did that, there were a lot of back and forths on email. This will just allow the lab staff and the scientific staff to know, hey, we're going in for this purpose. So, it would allow them to anticipate the staff and user needs. We also made a few underlying code changes. Currently, as of 3.5, NEMO's email methods, when a calendar invite goes out, there are currently 2 different methods, one for cancellation, one for creation of a resolution. We also created a third one for when a reservation is confirmed. The problem was they're all pretty much the same. So we actually made another underlying change to the reservation model to take in the cancellation reason. And then we were able to, by doing that, we were able to combine all three of those into a single method, created a decision tree at the top level to determine whether or not a reservation was canceled, whether it was confirmed, or whether it was just awaiting anything to change. And then we generated an email from there. We also added a few changes to the calendar invite itself. Namely, we included the time zone in the timestamp because some people were having problems when they imported it. We also changed the titles of them so that they matched up with whether or not the reservation was being requested, reserved, confirmed, or if it was being canceled. So back to those calendar view changes. So everything that I was talking about the calendar view and the confirmation system is predicated by a single customization that we implemented. Here you see reservations require confirmation. If this value is set to disabled, well, if it's set to anything but enabled, the calendar will look pretty much like NEMO. However, if it's set to enabled, the reservation details window will change. Unconfirmed reservations will show up differently on the calendar, and anyone with confirmation power will be able to see this button. I'll show more about this when I do a live demo shortly. So let me switch which screen I'm sharing. And I'll show you a live demo of our splash pad that we have. Okay, making sure it's shared. So you can see here, it looks pretty similar at this point. I have a few other tabs open. I'm going to go into the calendar view. So this is one of our teams. So as you can see, we have quite a number of areas, quite a number of tools. This isn't even all of the ones that we use in our main live view. The thing is, though, at this point, if I go into this tab, I've actually disabled this for now because I just wanted to show you how it would look. So I'm going to enable this. And I'm going to refresh our screen. So the first thing you'll probably notice is this little extra sidebar here. We added this to let anyone with confirmation powers know that some of the reservations are still awaiting some work. So if you go to the calendar, now those ones that are awaiting review show up in red. So I can click on this one. This is one of our test users. They're waiting for us to confirm this reservation for tomorrow. I have this other one here that's been confirmed as of last week by myself. And then we have this other one that's just straight confirmed. One thing to note is on the back end, when the reservation system or the confirmation system is turned off, all reservations are auto-confirmed without any user or time or date associated with them. This would allow, this basically maps how regular NEMO works versus how we're using Bruce. One other thing we added was this confirmation window. This will only appear to people with confirmation powers, but it will give all of the reservations that are still awaiting confirmation in one nice little view. Again, this was built off 3.5. The 2 was showing some things that were coming in recently that shows all areas, all tools. That would have been a really useful thing for us to have back then. Unfortunately, we didn't have it. So we built it this way. Let's see. One thing I'm going to show now is if I impersonate one of the test users. Going back, that that column about reservations that need review is gone because this test user does not have that power. If you notice, some of these are in red on the table. That's because they're awaiting confirmation from somebody. If I go into the calendar view, that extra view is no longer there. Then if I click on a user, I can see that this was confirmed. For this one in particular, this one just says this reservation is awaiting confirmation. For people who do not have confirmation powers, that's what they'll see. Also, I said a user can change the title. This would just give it a nice little direct message to the person who would do the confirmation. So let's go over some things that were changed on the back end. So if you look at if you have a view of the detailed administrative, so here's a reservation. So we added this cancellation reason. That way, the reason for canceling this particular reservation is actually stored somewhere. We also added these three fields here, a flag to tell whether or not the reservation is confirmed or not, when it was confirmed and by whom. We also changed the user preferences model. We added this extra calendar invite information about whether or not to receive an email when your reservations are confirmed. This also works for any reservations for when you are linked as a supervisor. I'll show how that works coming up. And there's also this field for an alternate email address that is settable by the user. The last thing that we have is this supervisor field. So I'm the supervisor for test user 3. So anytime, in my personal preferences on this splash pad, I will receive any emails when a reservation is confirmed, excuse me. So I will receive any confirmation emails for not only myself, but for test user 3 or anyone else I'm linked to. So this actually created a couple of different use cases from the NCNR perspective. One of our teams is a group of 3 with a single with one single person allowed in the building at a time out of those 3. So what that team did is they linked each other as supervisors to each other, and so that when one of them gets a reservation to go into the building, the other 2 get an email saying, "Hey, this person's going in at this time, so you will not be able to go in yourself." So that was a nice little extra use case that came out of this. I'll go into the actual user preferences so you can see I set my personal email address. I have this checkbox here. The one thing to note, let's see, is there anything else I want to? As far as the live demo goes, I'm going to stop there, go back to my presentation. I think that's it, yes. So a little bit about a timeline on how all this went down. So right about July 1st, our first implementation of NEMO was put online. This was about a week before our first reactor cycle started in early July, after the NIST restart. The first cycle, the laboratory people could tell that they were not going to be able to use NEMO as is, with the management requirement for direct confirmation of everything, which is where I came in roughly mid-August. So mid-August, I was asked to help out with doing some work on creating this confirmation system. Around early September, right as we were starting up our second reactor cycle, I did my first commit to GitHub to to start the confirmation system. By the end of that reactor cycle, we had a test bed that was sometime in October. By the time our third reactor cycle that started in November took place, we had a almost fully functioning system with all of this in place. By mid-November, if you look at my commit history on GitHub, after mid-November, there was no work until last week on this particular branch. So in terms of future work that we want to do, the first thing is we want to integrate all of the latest NEMO features into Bruce. So I've been looking at some of the features that Matthew's been putting out, and they would be really helpful for some of the things we want to do in the future. And I'll get into that. There's a couple bug fixes that we need to do. Particularly, there's still one thing that doesn't get when we turn off the confirmation system, the email preference still sticks around for receiving emails when the reservation is confirmed. So that needs to go away. But the real question is, COVID protocols are being lifted. You know, our numbers allowed in the building are higher. There's murmurs that we might actually be able to start bringing users in soon, things like that. So if we don't necessarily need to limit the number of people, are we still going to use NEMO? Well, after some discussions with certain staff and management, the answer is there's a good chance we will, mostly because the users and staff like to be able to go log into Bruce and look and say, oh, this piece of equipment is already checked out. I guess I'll try to use it at this point. Or, I mean, management has really liked the equipment maintenance functions that are built into NEMO. Mostly the way to directly email en masse everybody who's associated with that piece of equipment. Also, the inventory system, our laboratory manager is really liking that and is starting to actually link those to various, is trying to use that to link to reservations so that we can track, laboratory equipment or laboratory disposables so that we know when to restock. So here's some information on where you can find everything. There's the GitHub repository for our implementation of NEMO. I think Matthew had that in his talk as well. Our Docker that we build is here. If you want more information on the NCNR, you can go to nist.gov/NCNR. And then our 2 live servers, this is our splash pad, are here. However, you can only access these if you're inside of the NIST firewall, which only a few of us might actually be. Finally, I just want to acknowledge a few people. So driving all of this content are the people who are doing all the scheduling for the labs and a few other teams, Paul Butler and Molly Hernandez. I want to thank Alan Munter and Brian Randville for getting the initial NEMO set up and then handing it over to me. There were various beta testers throughout all of this, most of which are NCNR staff scientists. And I also want to, personally thank Matthew for some, help with not only getting NEMO set up, but also some guidance along the way, because there were some things that I really did not know where to go, and just one quick email was all I needed. And finally, I want to thank the NCNR management for all of their support for letting us actually do this. And with that, I will field some questions. Stop sharing. Okay, so I see 3 questions. How easy is it to keep in sync with upstream code? That's a very good question. It's, for the most part, how much time do I have? What time is mine? For the most part, it's not that difficult. The only issue I've had is a couple of merge conflicts between NEMO and what I've been working on. The other thing you have to worry about is if you're changing the backend model, you have to worry about the migration scripts and make sure that they go in order, in proper order. Otherwise, you could cause some issues with your database. But as far as there's another question that's very similar about my integration plan for the main branch, and it's basically that I had 3.6 already implemented at one point, and then for some reason we never deployed it on our primary server. Let's see. So I mean it's really just going to be pull in base NEMO, merge it into our branch off of our base branch, merge NEMO into Bruce, and then fix the conflicts, fix the what's it called, the migration script order, and go from there. So will it be possible to sync NEMO calendar with a Gmail calendar? That's a good question. I think ICS invites work in Gmail calendars, but I'm not entirely sure. So I would actually leave that to Matt too, if he wouldn't mind. But we didn't have any plan to do that at the NCNR. And I see one other person. What about submitting my code changes back and having them accepted into upstream? We actually discussed that early on, and that was just not going to happen for various maintenance reasons. And as a software writer, I can understand the reasons. I don't want to go into them, but that was unfortunately not going to happen.
Yeah, and I can maybe just really quickly talk about this. I remember we had the discussion about having some of those changes, back into NEMO, and at least at the time. And I mean, this is always something we could revisit. But one of the main issues that we had is that it didn't quite go with the underlying way that we wanted NEMO to be, which is users would go in and have the ability to set, their own reservation, and we set the rules, and then they can go and click and get the warnings and whatnot. But that, we set the rules ahead of time, and that was kind of our model. So this went a little bit against it by having an actual manual step to confirm things, because mostly, I guess, it's at NIST, at this nanofab, we have, a lot. There's a lot of users, and there's a lot of tools and all happening at the same time. So it would be quite the undertaking to have some staff people actually confirm things. But we can revisit that. I mean, I saw that we saw that they added an option to enable it or not. So they could be a way that maybe at some point this is something that we decide to incorporate, or maybe that's something that is made into a plugin that then kind of takes that away from the actual GitHub stuff, but just kind of makes it its own project on the side that could then be enabled on other things.
We were actually discussing that recently about trying to convert it into a plugin just for that purpose, because we think it's a good feature, but we're not sure if we're not sure how much longer we're going to be able to maintain it, because if we get rid of our COVID protocols, we might actually turn it off ourselves, but it'll still be there. So, but with that, if there's no more questions for me, I think that concludes with 1 minute remaining.
Yeah, perfectly on time, like 1 minute left. So yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was very interesting to see how you guys implemented those changes, and how using it, like, again, in the different way that we are, that works for you guys, and that you guys were able to do this pretty quickly, really, and turn it around and have that working and live. So good job there.